This is NextGen Indiana, where young Hoosiers talk politics,
fight for progress, and shape Indiana's future.
From Indianapolis to Fort Wayne, Bloomington to the region, we're the next generation that won't wait our turn.
This is NextGen Indiana, the voice of young Hoosiers claiming our political power.
Welcome to NextGen Indiana. My name is Ben Barenko. I'm one of the co-hosts. I'm a student here at IU, majoring in sports media and political science, and I'm joined today by two lovely state legislatures. House Representative Matt Pierce represents District 61, which is most of Bloomington, and then State Senator Shelli Yoder, who represents District 40, which is almost all of Monroe County, almost more than half.
Most of Monroe County.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you guys just want to give a short introduction, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I've served in the legislature since 2002, and I'm on a bunch of committees. So I'm on the Utilities Committee, which has a lot of action, Courts and Criminal Code, Rules and Legislative Procedures. And I had a short stint on elections because of all the redistricting mania this session. And then I'm also on the Statutory Committee on Ethics.
Awesome.
Well, it's great to be here. So thank you, Ben, for the invitation. I have the honor of serving as the Senate Minority Leader. I am also ranking minority member on natural resources and agriculture, as well as health and health providers, health service providers. I serve on Education Committee, and Local Government Committee, and it's great to be here.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, kind of as we were saying, you guys both represent Bloomington, and that's where I kind of want the first question to go. So what is it like representing such, you have a very unique population, almost half students. It's a pretty diverse area, and just I think being the college town with the arts, unique to the rest of the state. So what is it like representing Bloomington?
Well, it definitely is a fantastic community to represent. I like to say that I have a fantastic legislative assistant. Her name is Rachel Gray. Shout out to Rachel. But she will say, she has worked for a lot of different senators and House representatives, but Monroe County has the best constituents. So that's not just me being biased. We've got other votes to count as well, and she really appreciates all the calls and emails and that we get. But the unique sort of aspect of my Senate district is number 40. Not that anybody is keeping track of the numbers, but I think what's interesting is in the last few years, the legislature has gone very far to silence the voice of students, quite honestly. And so it does create this unique aspect of representing and serving a district that is comprised of so many students who deserve to have fair representation and have their voices heard, and it's been difficult.
Yeah, I think the thing about Bloomington is so diverse compared to the other communities out there in Indiana. So I just think of my own community, people live like on my cul-de-sac are just people from literally all over the world, Korea, Tibet, all these different places. And so we're just used to that in Bloomington. You have a very diverse group of people, and you don't think twice about it, and you celebrate all that brings to your community. And other legislators don't have that similar experience, and so that's one issue. And then the other thing is, particularly the university being here, there are so many people who are experts in their area. So I think most other people, they talk to constituents who have opinions, and they might know about their particular occupation. But we have a whole district full of people who spend all day studying in detail particular aspects of policy and things. And so that gives you a vast reservoir of knowledge that you can draw upon, and it also keeps you on your toes, because when you're talking to people, they're going to know their stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like having that reservoir of knowledge, and I think professors are some of the most interesting people on the planet. So it's kind of maybe a double-sided coin at times to have that kind of educated populace. But one of the things I do want to touch on, and Shelli, you kind of started to, but Senate Enrolled Act 10, which is the student ID ban. Kind of what was your guys' reaction to that during the session, just in terms of like really kind of taking away a voice from students? And why do you think the Republican legislature is going after students in that capacity?
Perhaps it started back in 2008, when Barack Obama took Indiana, and they saw the very important role that our campuses played in that win for President Barack Obama. And since then, it's just been a chipping away, really questioning and creating sort of as suspect the student vote. And what Senate Bill, or Senate Enroll Act, which is now stayed, 10 did was say that students couldn't use their ID to vote, not to register. We know you can't register to vote with a student ID, but to vote when you already have that registration secured, it just was really a bridge too far, making it incredibly difficult for students to practice their democratic right.
Yeah, I think it's just voter suppression, plain and simple. I think the Republicans feel that students are just big block of Democratic Party voters, which I think is ridiculous. And it just shows that they don't really treat students as kind of thinking grown-ups. They think they're just led around. And then what we heard a lot too was, the students, they cheat, they vote at home and then they vote on their campus and they're voting twice and there's no way for us to figure it out. So when this bill came to the House, I asked the House sponsor a lot of questions, and it was just ridiculous because he kept bringing up stuff that had nothing to do with voter ID. The theory of voter ID is it proves you are who you say you are when you show up, so you can't impersonate another person and vote for them. That's the whole argument. He would bring up, whether people were qualified to register, and I'd say, well, no, wait a minute, this is not that part of the code. This has nothing to do with proving whether you're, legally entitled to register to vote. And then he said, well, we're fixing this because we've been treating students specially. We've been giving them special treatment. And I said, it's interesting because you give the veterans and the military over here special treatment. It's like, why are we not getting rid of that special treatment? And just had no good answer for any of it. So I think it's pretty clear that they want to make it as hard as possible for students to vote. And so what I'm hoping will happen is students will say, this is my constitutional right. I live here 9 months out of the year. If this is where I want to vote, because this is what they call the domicile, the lawyers call the domicile, then I'm going to come hell or high water vote. And I'm going to study up on make sure I know what I need to do to be get registered, what I need when I get to the poll. And if I got to go out and sit around BMV for 2 hours someday, I'm going to do it because it's worth it not to be silenced. I want students to get really angry about this attempt to cancel out their vote. And I'm hoping that it will really do everything they need to do be eligible and actually show up and vote.
Yeah, and I think, definitely to that point, like, at least I consider Bloomington to be my home, and I want to vote where I am going to be represented. I want to vote where I have stake in the community, and to just have, another one of those things trying to chip away at it, it's definitely disheartening, for sure. And I think this also kind of gets into a bigger question, which is, it's probably at times very hard to work with the Republican legislators up in Indy. But when you guys are up there in session, do you feel that you take a more, because I think some school of thought is you take a very obstructionist approach to government, you try to stall things, impede things, or are there places where you look for cooperation, and kind of what are those places?
Ben, I am so glad you said that because I don't see it as being obstructionist whatsoever. The best policy is policy that has been thoroughly vetted and debated. And too frequently, because now we are in this supermajority state house and really statewide, we lack the due diligence that every single piece of policy needs in order to ensure that we've turned over every stone, we've asked the right questions, we've turned to the experts, we've listened to them, and we've made sure that this piece of legislation is going to be positive for Hoosiers and moving this state forward. But because we are in the situation that we're in, we do get tagged as obstructionists when we are simply asking questions, and it would be beneficial to have our Republican colleagues asking those questions too, and certainly they do, but it isn't as common as the role of the Democrats who are serving in both the Senate and the House. And to that, I would just say, in the end, we share the goal of wanting to have good policy in Indiana. So we have an important role to play in asking those questions from the floor and in committee.
Right. definitely.
Yeah, I think the key thing is particularly when they're bringing some bad policy through or something that's kind of self-serving is you just want to ensure that bill has full debate and that all the rules are followed, that they're not shortcuts. And, you might do some things you wouldn't otherwise do to make sure that, that debate actually happens. So, for example, when a bill comes out of committee, you can file something called a minority report. That doesn't happen on every bill, but bills that are really controversial or have bad policies, that's another opportunity to debate the bill on the floor. And so essentially the idea is that the more you can use the rules to force a discussion about the bill, the more likely it is the public will understand what's happening and perhaps convince their legislators to do something differently. And so that some people perceive that as obstruction, and it's really just, requiring the process to be followed, the rules to be followed. And I think that's the key thing. And then there are other times when, and it's gotten a lot harder, it seems like every election cycle it's a little harder. But, for example, in 2014, I was involved in rewriting the criminal code, reforming it. We did a lot of great things, reducing drug sentences and really kind of redirecting, away from mass incarceration. Still more work to do there, but it was a leap forward. And I was able to do that with other Republicans who had concluded that we were just going to bankrupt ourselves building more and more prisons. And so when you have that opportunity, then you try to work together as best you can and you try to influence it. And my Republican colleagues always joke, they say, like, you always want more. You're always demanding more. And it's like, yeah, because we need more.
Right. Exactly. I think that's kind of the role, at least one of the roles of a party in the super minorities. You have to be diligent. You have to be watchdogs. And you have to be kind of, very intently observing everything and make sure nothing gets passed. And like you can call things out and bring these things to the attention of Hoosiers whenever they can. And then when we look back on the session, what are some of those things that you think you really want to make sure Hoosiers are aware of that either happened or didn't happen? What are some of the takeaways that you want everyday Hoosiers to know that happened during the session?
Well, maybe not unique to even this session, but every session, the real effort that goes into making sure that every bill is vetted and in good shape before either we send it over to the House or definitely when you send it to the governor. But it does seem that it seems a little bit more frequent for me. I mean, I haven't been there very long. I mean, I've been there since 2021. But more and more, we don't have much robust debate on the floor, and the response is too frequently a canned response, the same answer. We can't amend it. We file numerous amendments on bills and trying to get them in better shape. And this bill can't be changed because it's too important to Hoosiers. And that kind of phrase or that answer, I don't know. Maybe ask someone who might, and you are on the floor, and that kind of response is not going to be beneficial to Hoosiers who truly do want representation, and not only do they want it, they deserve it.
Right.
And so that's what I would say is it gets harder and harder.
Yeah, in the House of Representatives, you can tell the Republicans have a very specific strategy of not engaging in the debate, because I think they know that the more they engage, the more back and forth there is, the more friction, the more likely the media is to cover it. And so they essentially just let you blast away at them and they never respond, which drives you nuts. I oftentimes see how far can I push these guys to see if they'll actually respond? Yeah. And I forget what the bill was. I had one bill and I was just kind of blasting away on them. And the majority floor leader, we're off to the side a little bit. He's like, yeah, I got to keep all these guys, backbenchers, you riled up from coming up here and talking. I got to keep them sitting. I got to tell them, calm down or whatever. And it's funny because they just know that it's hard. If you really engage them on the policy of what they're trying to do, it's very weak arguments on their side. And so the more they can avoid that, the better off they are. So it gets frustrating to just kind of hear silence from the other side.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of almost know, if they start to open their mouth on some of these things, it's going to get called out and picked apart, which is telling, I think. And this is very interesting.
Well, I also want Hoosiers to know when they listen to this podcast, it is just because there are fewer Democrats, we're doing no less work. I mean, it is an incredible honor to serve Hoosiers, and preparing for each day session, whether it's for committee or on the floor. It's just, it is kind of relentless work, and you have to just be willing to go to the microphone, and these are your colleagues, but there is no other way to put forth better legislation than to have that debate and have those arguments and those questions on the floor.
Yeah, well, I definitely applaud and thank both of you for putting in that effort and that work. I guess it was a couple weeks ago, we were interviewing Senator Hundley and Representative Porter, and one of the things they were really talking about is a big kind of mantra for this session was affordability. So I want to ask you guys, what are some of the things that either you were working on personally, that you guys were trying to get across in terms of affordability? What worked, what didn't work, stuff like that?
Well, when we were called back into a special session, it was just a regular session at the end, but early for redistricting. We knew that this was the start of the regular session, and it was only going to shorten our regular session and make dealing with issues of affordability for Hoosiers that much more difficult when we were hearing from Hoosiers from throughout the state that whether it was housing or childcare or utility rates or health care, it's getting more and more expensive to call Indiana home. And so that was our focus from the Senate Democratic Caucus, and each of us filed bills and worked on legislation in each of those 4 pillars. And we made it a priority in the Senate. It didn't necessarily start off that way, but because it became kind of this rallying cry, I was glad to see that my Senate Republican colleagues picked that up by the end, and it was so important, but we did not nearly address the issue of affordability that we needed to.
Yeah, for the first time, I felt that Republicans are actually nervous. I think they know that the affordability problem has become so critical to a lot of families that they're kind of in a hole politically because they haven't really addressed those problems at all. So in the last session, I think they felt we better come up with some things lines we can put on our campaign brochures. And so they brought in some legislation, and the one I was involved with most was on utility side. And, it did something. It advances the ball a little bit, but, I and others had amendments that would say, let's just not charge sales tax on energy use because it's a necessity, and we can give people an immediate 7% cut on these really high bills. And I just couldn't get them to do it. And so I think that was a real missed opportunity. So, I think for people who are in low-income areas that qualify for certain programs, they'll get a little more help. But there's going to be a lot of people kind of in the middle who are still struggling to make their budget work for them every month, and they're not really going to get any help. And so, we just keep pounding away. Another example of that, is childcare. It's always like, well, next year we'll get around to that. And the Democrats pushing on both the House and the Senate were able to get this provision in the bill that gave the governor through his budget committee, I guess, the opportunity to use some of the extra money that's come in for childcare up to $300 million, and I guess he did $200 million. So, still a problem. We could have a whole discussion about childcare and how they've kind of dropped the ball on that, but at least it was something. And again, I think that's from the minority, pushing and pushing, asking, why aren't you addressing this? What are you going to do about this? Why don't you take this avenue? And eventually, I think you wear them down and they feel they have to do something, or it'll be hard to explain to the public at election time.
So we had 35,000 kiddos on the wait list for childcare vouchers. And we pushed this and during the 2026 legislative session and could not get anywhere in terms of addressing that wait list. And it was only the governor doing something by an executive order to put that $200 million toward the 35,000 kids who are on the wait list. And that will address 14,000 families. And that is important. But we still have the other 14, the other half of that those children need that access to child care vouchers. Well, the families do. This is a serious economic impact for Hoosiers. And additionally to utility rates and child care, health care, the priority bill for the Senate side was Senate Enrolled Act 1. It's now an Enrolled Act, so Senate Bill 1. And that addressed Medicaid and SNAP benefits. And the approach that the Senate Enrolled Act 1 is taking is really reducing the number of Hoosiers who qualify, will just be, who would qualify for Medicaid and need that healthcare access support, would now make them ineligible for Medicaid dollars. And that approach does not lower healthcare costs for Hoosiers. We're going to all see that impact, and our healthcare costs will increase for Hoosiers throughout Indiana. So that was definitely not the approach that I would take, or removing access to healthy nutrition. I mean, if food is medicine, SNAP benefits, which was also in Senate Enrolled Act 1, was not the right direction for Indiana, but that did get signed into law.
And this is the really frustrating thing is that the majority party for the last decade has been redoing the tax code in a way that benefits the wealthiest Hoosiers. And it's limiting the amount of revenue coming in to actually invest in things that would actually make the economy go. If you have good, quality, affordable childcare, more people can be in the workforce, and that helps your economy. If you have a healthcare system where you're not ball and chained to your employer, now you can go be entrepreneurial. You can start your own business, and that can help the economy. And so the majority party is stuck in this kind of 40-year-old economic development rut where you just kind of keep rewarding the people at the top. You hand out the subsidies to the big corporations, and somehow that will trickle down to other people instead of investing directly into people, saying, like, how can we make college more affordable? How can we eliminate all the student debt that students accumulate going to college? How can we have good health care, affordable housing, all that?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the things that people need to realize is when we expand these services, they actually do have pretty great economic benefit.
I just want to say, there was such criticism on the expansion of pre-K and spending in the space of pre-K dollars. And then we invested, not just pre-K, but we invested in those child care vouchers under the previous administration. And that was what they addressed. We are pulling back those dollars. But at the same time, last June, not even a year ago, Indiana was looking at the best reading scores that we were seeing among third graders, that we had those advancements. And you could say, well, maybe it was because we invested in those most precious years where your brain is developing the fastest from 0 to 5 in those childcare, high-quality childcare and pre-K dollars. And we're going to be celebrating those higher scores in reading and at the same time taking away those vouchers. It seems not the best policy for Indiana.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely the case. I think this is more so on the Senate side, but one of the I'm sure this applies to the House too, but one of the tests that you guys had for legislation and policy was if it would make it easier for Hoosiers to afford living here, then it was good. Is that kind of the attitude that you guys want to carry into the next session?
Absolutely. That should be something that we're thinking about all the time with legislation. How will this impact the pocketbooks of Hoosiers, of those living here? And we will continue to take that forward.
Yeah, it's definitely about just thinking, what are the everyday problems and challenges that average Hoosier families face, and what can the government do to help them face those challenges and do better? And that's where we ought to focus our energy. And the biggest problem with the General Assembly you have now is they're just focused off on all these crazy side issues, culture wars, and problems of the wealthiest people in the state, like giving an extra school voucher to some millionaire who's sending their kid to private school. It's just a complete waste of money as far as advancing the economy or anything in Indiana.
Yeah, totally. And what are some of those those key things on affordability that maybe didn't get done this session, but you guys are hoping to get done next session, or things that had momentum that you're wishing to carry over?
Well, not to keep talking about this, but childcare. We have no infrastructure for childcare. We are looking at vouchers to be the infrastructure, the safety net, and it serves that purpose. But we should be looking at family leave. We should be looking at universal pre-K. We should be looking at ways that we can help families and invest in Indiana's not just future, but now, to make it as strong as it can be economically. And those kinds of programs states around the United States are looking at that, and as a matter of fact, the Trump administration is noticing, and they are looking at providing grants to those states that do have a family leave program.
Yeah, the biggest thing is to continue pushing back against just the negative policy direction, whether it's on childcare, healthcare. The thing that frustrates me, and we're going to have a budget next year, so you'll have an opportunity to discuss what are the priorities of the state, based on where we put our money. And it's just frustrating that instead of looking at the budget and saying, what do we need to do to meet the needs of our people, it's kind of like, how much money do you want to spend? And if we got to throw a bunch of people off of Medicaid, we'll do it. If we need to create a bunch of hurdles and more reporting and all kinds of crazy requirements that are going to trick bag people, even though they qualify to get the help, we'll do that. And so we need to be there explaining to people that it doesn't have to be this way. You could be thinking about what are the resources we need to really solve this problem and fight for those resources and push back on this idea of we just have a bottom line number we want to get to, and we don't really care how that impacts people. We just want to be able to say, we have this wonderful fiscally responsible budget.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what would you guys say is one concrete win they took away from the session? And it could also be from your win could include the special session that we had, which I think was a very, very huge win. And we can touch on that too if we want. But one concrete.
Yeah, for me, that's the top one, redistricting.
Absolutely.
Because when they started talking about that, I'm sure everyone, and I have to admit even me a little bit, was like, oh man, they got this supermajority. They can do whatever they want. But we just got in there and started fighting. In the middle of last summer, it was crazy, just trying to, rally the people, keep them engaged, keep the pressure on, get on media anywhere we could, and really push that. And I think we got the people energized enough. They were talking to their legislators. And I think, in the Senate, the Republicans, concluded, and really in the House even, it was 56 votes. And most of the Republican leadership voted against redistricting. So we really kind of pushed that from 70 down to 56, which was pretty good. But it's a tremendous victory because they had all the power. If they wanted to and they could hang together, they could have come in and literally suspended all the rules and changed those maps in an hour if they wanted to. But they didn't, and we had a great victory.
Yes, we did. So redistricting and defeating that push in Indiana, but I'm going to go very micro and something very small. And that was a bill that passed from Senator Mark Spencer. He is a freshman senator. He's a member of the Senate Democratic Caucus, and he had a bill that would study microfarming. And from as far from Gary down to Charlestown, we need to be looking at ways that people can easily and affordably grow their own food and be able to start their little microfarm on the tiny little plot of land that they have, whether they're in an apartment or in their own home. We haven't even talked about housing, and we probably should, but that was a win, and it was small, and probably most people didn't even know that we heard that bill, but it's good policy for Indiana.
Yeah, I think, and it almost kind of sounds like it'd do a good job at addressing food deserts, which are really truly a huge problem, especially in Indianapolis and our more urban areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Although I will mention on the redistricting part, I think that was honestly one of the most genuinely encouraging moments of my political awareness. It was just to see what not only in first off in Indiana, a very red state, what we can do when we all get together and push back against something and say this is wrong. So kind of want to ask what was that experience of collective activism like for you guys to watch as the decision makers?
It was definitely different in both of the chambers, the strategy. And so I'll let Representative Pierce talk about the House. But for the Senate, we were out there right away in August. When we caught wind that Vice President Vance was coming to Indiana to convince Republican legislators to redistrict and move our congressional maps from a 7-2 to a 9-0 all Republican. I was actually at the National Conference for State Legislatures in Massachusetts, and I caught the first flight I could, got back to Indiana. Not that he was coming that day, but I knew we needed to get busy. We needed to mobilize and organize Hoosiers immediately, because at the end of the day, one thing about the sort of the Hoosier sentimentality is we're not cheaters. I mean, this isn't how we're going to do this, and we're going to come by these maps fairly, and people want to be part of that. And we got that messaging right, but we couldn't ease up. We had to keep going and be relentless, because at every sort of with the passing of every month, we thought, okay, I think it's passed. I think we did it. And then, it would get a second breath, a second life, and we would continue having to continue to fight it. So, we were on the messaging. But when we got into closer to it actually happening, our strategy had to shift. So that was just being able to be nimble, being able to really sort of have those coalitions built, some trust among legislators, and really listen to one another. And I think the Senate was able to hold. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's also not only Hoosiers don't cheat, but we also don't like to be told what to do. That's a big one. We're our abbreviation might be IN, and I think a lot of it stands for independent thinking. Don't boss us around, and that was huge with all of the threats that were happening, the swatting incidents. I think in the end, it kind of worked against their strategy.
Yeah, I heard about it first when I got a call from our press people, and they say, hey, we're kind of hearing rumors that there might be an effort to redistrict, and the media is going to ask the governor about that today. And so when he answers, we might have an idea of whether or not this is coming, like Texas, because I just thought Texas was this weird one-off, down there, and they're going to do it. And so I said, like, okay, I'm coming up there, and I'm just going to hang outside the governor's office, and if he basically says, yeah, we're actually entertaining this, then I'm just going to start firing back right there and then. And so I had my own little press gaggle to get it going. And then we all just started working together to move that up. And it's interesting because, one of the things you have to decide is what is the best strategy. I mean, sometimes it's just you got to give them hell, dress them down, yell at them, practically call them every name in the book within the rules, because we have rules of decorum. But, sometimes that's what's called for. And then other times it's well, you don't want to push them kind of into this team mode where, we all have to circle the wagons now. And so what I chose to do instead in the House is just say, this is really sad that we're even here, and that, this is an institution that will be here hopefully long after we're gone. And what have we done to preserve it, to make it better, do all of that, and really just tried to kind of shame them into not voting for it. And that was my strategy. And then watching the Senate was infuriating for a period of time. And then I thought to myself, you know what? The people doing this just insane, over the top, insane attacks on Democrats, that's this talk of losers. And I said, I know this bill's going down, because the way these people are talking, they're having a little spasm, or they're trying to prove to the guy with the orange hair in D.C. that they're really, fighting hard or whatever. But that was kind of the most outrageous floor debate I've ever seen in, 30 or 40 years of watching that place. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the important point you have to make is hey, this goes against our values as a state, and you represent our state, and this should go against every single one of your guys' values. And I think that really did resonate. But it's very impressive, the persistence that was displayed by not only Hoosiers, but also the Democratic Party and the minority.
Ben, thank you for bringing that up, because in the end, it really was Hoosiers that was their win. We are elected to represent their voice, and we listen to what they want. And so that's us carrying their desires. And it was hundreds of thousands of emails and letters and calls, and a relentlessness in that pursuit of defeating the redistricting effort. Mm-hmm. So it was really a win for Hoosiers based on the work of Hoosiers.
Yeah, definitely was, for sure. So one kind of closing question here as we are about to wrap up. But what does the future of the Indiana Democratic Party look like to you guys?
I'm actually pretty excited about it, because I think we have an opportunity in this upcoming election to pick up seats and to, in the House, maybe break the supermajority. We just need about 4 more seats, and we can get there. And I think that, we have an opportunity to win a statewide race too. And so I think if we can come out of the other side of the election having won a statewide race and having picked up some seats, particularly if we can break the supermajority, I think that changes the whole landscape because the press will treat you more seriously. The people who donate to campaigns will think, okay, things are on the move. And I think our base will say, wow, we won a statewide race. I thought we were a hopeless red state that no Democrat could ever win. And I think that will get people really fired up to do the full push for the governor's race. And if you can win the governorship, all kinds of things change. The people are going to be the trustees of our university change. I mean, it's going to be tremendous changes in what happens. And so I'm kind of excited. I think we're in a point where we can really come up.
Yeah.
I would agree. Very excited. And, since the first time since 1974, the Senate Democratic Caucus we're running a candidate in every single district, not since 1974. Additionally, we have our chance to possibly flip 2 additional Senate seats, and we have not seen that since 1988. So I know that when you talk about breaking the supermajority in the Senate districts are a bit more gerrymandered than the House districts, so that hill is a lot steeper. However, any flipping of any district, it does make a difference, and since 1988, we have a chance to flip 2.
Yeah, I think it's definitely right. It feels encouraging. The fact that we're having so much discussion over the Secretary of State's race, over something like the fact that we're running a candidate in almost every single House and Senate district. It's very encouraging. It's definitely it's good. But yeah, I work for House District 62 for Amy Oliver, and that's like one of the things. Like you can feel how close that race is. You can feel just the energy of like, hey, we can break super minority, we can get the power statewide, and we can really make Indiana better. We can change it for the better. Wondering, do you guys have any?
Well, I would just
closing
say,
thoughts?
democracy, it does take so much work. It's based on us. It's based on its citizenry caring enough and getting involved in voting. But when you think about how long, how much work it takes for democracy, it really takes not that much work for democracy because it takes us voting, but it also takes us just getting involved in maybe just one race. And you will have this experience of, wow, I did that. And Election Day will mean so much more to you if you have a candidate that you've invested just a little bit of time, spend one afternoon going door to door or phone banking for a candidate. It changes the way that you understand the races and your investment in each and every election. So I would encourage, 1, definitely vote. 2, pick one race and get involved in it.
Yeah, democracy takes stamina, and you just got to keep working at it. And you know what? Your work is never done. There's always something around the corner that needs to get done. And so people need to be engaged. It's when we kind of get distracted by other things and kind of disengage from democracy that we really have bad things happen.
Yeah, definitely would like to emphasize that. I would say it's pretty easy to get involved and just pick, one candidate you really like, you want to throw your support behind, go knock some doors, make some phone calls, and, be invested in the campaign and, know that you caused that change.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, we are dealing with human beings, and each and every one of us, we are the ones who will advance good government and democracy going forward. And I do talk to people occasionally where they'll say, well, I'm so disappointed in, this, in both parties. And, well, it will take you to make that change.
Right. 100% agree. Kind of always wrap up here. Is there places that people can find you, whether on social media or things that you want to direct folks to?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do is just Google Indiana House Democrats, and you'll get a link to all the social media stuff, which I can hardly keep track of, but we're out there.
Join me on Facebook for Shelli Yoder. You can find me on Instagram, and I hope folks follow along and get involved.
Yes, definitely get involved for sure. Well, thank you guys both for such an amazing episode. Really appreciate you guys' time. Keep fighting the good fight up in Indianapolis. Yeah, thank you so much.
NextGen IN is the property of Black Pro IT Solutions and Black Pro Studios. Executive producer, Indiana's own Dana Black. Music by Omar Farouk from Pixabay.